Today, we're diving into the story of Karpil, a really popular local drink from Tarija, Bolivia. And it's a fascinating story about what happens when a community icon, something people truly love, suddenly faces this massive crisis of trust with its own customers.
Because, this isn't really about a product on a shelf. It's about something much deeper. It's about cultural identity, it's about local pride, and what happens when a company kind of seems to forget who its customers really are. So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at why Karpil is such a big deal, a real cultural icon. Then we'll get into the crisis itself. What sparked it? We'll see how the company reacted by actually listening to its consumers, dig into what they heard back, the verdict from the streets, and finally explore its path to redemption.
Okay, so to really get why this crisis was such a big deal, you first have to understand what Karpil means to the people of Tarija. It's not just some random drink. So what is it? Well, Karpil is a popular dairy-based drink, and it's made by a company called tarija. Now, what's really crucial here is that this company is a cornerstone of the whole local economy. It buys its milk from local farmers, and it provides jobs all over the region. And you can see right here just how deeply this drink is woven into the community's fabric. For young people, it's a symbol of local pride. For farmers, it's a source of income. It creates jobs. This is not just a drink, it's practically a local institution.
And that deep connection, that pride, is exactly why this crisis hits so hard. So let's look at the moment this bond between the brand and its people was put to the ultimate test. So the whole problem started with what probably seemed like a pretty simple business decision. They changed the price and the amount of drink in each package. But the public reaction? It was anything but simple. It was immediate, it was angry, and it triggered a complete crisis of trust. And this slide right here shows exactly where it all went wrong. For years, people knew the deal. You paid $1 Boliviano, you got a 200 milliliter drink. Simple. But suddenly, the perception was that you had to pay more, $1.5 Boliviano, for less product. And that disconnect, right there, was the spark that lit the whole fire. And that fire spread incredibly fast. Social media just completely blew up with complaints. We're not talking about a few unhappy customers here. This was a viral movement. It proved that any little thing that felt like a slight against Karpil was seen as a slight against the entire community.
So, faced with a total public relations disaster, the company knew they couldn't just ignore the problem and hope it went away. They had to figure out exactly what happened. So they launched a really detailed investigation.
And instead of just guessing, they got methodical about it. First, they diagnosed all the potential issues, from rising costs to public perception. Then they went out and collected hard data, surveying actual consumers and talking to shop owners. After that, they analyzed everything, the numbers, the social media comments, the whole shebang. And only then could they come up with real, data-driven solutions.
So after all that research, what was the verdict? What did the people of Tarija actually have to say about all this? First off, who were they talking to? Well, it turns out that over half of the respondents were young adults between 19 and 30. This basically confirms that Karpil's core audience, the people who feel most connected to it, are the ones who grew up with it. But just because they felt that connection didn't mean they were buying it. In fact, here's the first huge shock from the data. A staggering 2/3 of the people surveyed said they don't consume Karpil regularly, 66%. So for all its cultural importance, there was this massive disconnect when it came to actual sales.
And for the people who do buy it, their preferences are pretty clear. It's all about those sweet, fruity flavors, right? Pineapple, peach, and orange are the clear favorites. So that gives the company a good baseline of what's already working.
Okay, but now for the million-dollar question. How did people really feel about those controversial changes to the price and the quantity? And here it is. This is the smoking gun. A clear majority, 55% of consumers, were convinced they were getting less product. It didn't even matter what the reality was. The perception was that the company was shortchanging them, and that is the root of broken trust. And to make matters even worse, there was just total confusion out in the market. Look at this. It was an exactly even split. 42.5% of people said they paid $1 Boliviano, while another 42.5% said they paid $1.50. This inconsistency just fueled that feeling of being taken advantage of, because nobody knew what the real price was supposed to be.
So with all this data in hand, how could they actually build a path forward? Well, the company now had a pretty clear roadmap, not just to fix the immediate problem, but to totally rebuild its relationship with its customers.
So the crucial question they had to answer was this: How can Karpil use all this feedback to innovate in a way that genuinely wins back the trust that it had lost?
And you know what? The consumers gave them a surprisingly clear answer. When they asked what new flavor people wanted to see, the response was overwhelming. More than half, over 54%, wanted papaya. This wasn't a guess, it was a direct, data-driven command from their customers.
And here's where the solution gets really elegant. The consumer's top choice, papaya, also happened to be a brilliant business decision. It's grown locally, which means lower costs. It supports the very same farmers the company relies on, which reinforces those community ties, and it's easy to integrate into their current production. It was just a perfect win-win.
So the path forward was clear. It really boiled down to 4 key things. First, be transparent about any changes. Second, innovate with your customers by giving them the papaya flavor they literally asked for. Third, reinforce quality so the product is always consistent. And finally, manage your reputation online so a crisis like this never spirals out of control again.
And this brings us to our final thought. The data provided a clear path to a new product and a much better strategy, but the core challenge is still there. For a brand like Karpil will say, whose value is tied so deeply to cultural identity, is a new flavor really going to be enough to repair a broken bond of trust? That's something that only time and the people of Tarija can answer.